Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
It was just 8 days before President Trump was inaugurated when David Ignatius at the Washington Post broke the news that there had been secret communications during the presidential transition period between incoming Trump National Security Advisor Mike Flynn and the Russian ambassador. As Ignatius wrote at the time, quote, "What did Flynn say, and did it undercut the U.S. sanctions?" Well, despite multiple denials from multiple people in the Trump administration that Flynn had discussed sanctions on his calls with the Russian government, a month later, the Washington Post would report that Flynn, in fact, did discuss sanctions with the Russian government on that call. Flynn was ultimately fired as National Security Advisor, and he ultimately pled guilty for lying to the FBI about that call. But for over 2 years, we've been curious to get more information about what exactly Flynn said when he had that conversation with the Russian ambassador that he and so many other people in the Trump transition publicly lied about. The call has been described in the Mueller report and in court documents, but that's all we've had is sort of vague descriptions. A couple of weeks ago, a federal judge demanded that prosecutors post a transcript of Flynn's call with the Russians on the public docket. The deadline for doing that was today. And in a development I don't think any of us saw coming, prosecutors today basically refused the judge's order to hand over that transcript. They told the judge they don't think that transcript was relevant to Flynn's guilty plea or to his upcoming sentencing. And I'm not a lawyer, but that seems weird, right? I mean, we know clearly from court documents that Flynn's discussion about sanctions with the Russians was absolutely 100% definitely at the root of Flynn's guilty plea. That call would seem to be utterly relevant to the determination of his guilt. Why would prosecutors refuse the judge's order to hand over the transcript of that call? And what is likely to happen now? Joining us now is Devlin Barrett, national security reporter at the Washington Post. Mr. Barrett, it's really nice to have you here. Thanks for making the time.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Let me ask you a real basic, almost logistical question first. Do we know that there are transcripts of Flynn's call or calls with the Russian government? Do we know that those calls were caught in U.S. government intercepts?
We do know that, but we only know that from sources because those transcripts are still classified. And that's really at the heart of what the prosecutors have decided to do here.
When you say that prosecutors, I mean, it's hard for us to discern what prosecutors have decided to do here because, at least to me, a non-lawyer, reading their explanations to the judge as to why they're not handing over that transcript, it feels a little bit like legal refrigerator poetry. They never say, we're not giving you this, judge, because it's classified, or we'd like to talk to you about this ex parte, or we'd like to, litigate this some other way. They just say, this isn't relevant. You understand, right? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. What do you understand about what they're doing here?
I think the point is this. Even the existence of these transcripts, even the existence of these phone calls, the recordings of those phone calls, look, the entire world knows these calls happened. The entire world knows that they were recorded by, on intercepts. But the problem for the prosecutors is that they have never publicly acknowledged that. Even if you look at number of the court filings in this case, even in those filings, at moments where Flynn says to the investigators, I know you guys probably recorded this call anyway, that part is redacted in those documents. So the government is in this position of not acknowledging that these recordings exist. And then the judge says you have to make them public. The trick is that the judge does not have the authority on his own to declassify stuff. And so the prosecutors are doing a kind of dance. It may be too coy, it may be too cute. And here's the real problem for them. Judge Sullivan does not dance. Yeah. Judge Sullivan is a hard-headed guy who wants what he wants, and he wants it right away. So the notion that Judge Sullivan is going to quietly go away just because the prosecutors sort of come up with a little linguistic dance around this issue, I think is very unlikely.
Also, it occurs to me that federal judges at all sorts of levels, but federal district court judges must deal with classified information all the time. I mean, it's not that classified information only comes up in the FISA court. It comes up in all sorts of different court cases, I would imagine. And so if this is an issue of classified material, wouldn't you expect the prosecutors to essentially go into classified material mode and deal with the judge about it on those terms? I think that's part of what also seems puzzling here.
Yeah, but I think you have to think of this as the first salvo of this back and forth. I think it's very likely that the judge will come back and say something to the effect of, to the exact point you're making, look, guys, you know what I ordered. What's the issue? What's the deal? You know what I want. And then you may see, I think one realistic scenario here is that you may see a sealed letter at that point where you have more of a, let's call it an honest but closed-door conversation about this material. But a lot of times when classified issues come up in the courts, what ends up happening is there's long back and forths between the agency that possesses the classified information and wants to keep it secret and a judge who, debates or considers pressing the government further to declassify. And again, a judge can press them to declassify, but it's ultimately the agency's call. And so in a lot of these cases where classified information comes up, there's a long back and forth, and this may be the beginning, the first round of a long back and forth over this.
The person who probably has most at stake for the length of that back and forth is Mike Flynn, who doesn't technically have a sentencing date yet. He's got a joint status report in a couple of weeks on June 14th. If there is going to be wrangling between the prosecutors and the judge on something like this, or even potentially on the other thing they didn't hand anything over on, which was this issue of whether or not there's other Flynn-related material that's redacted from Mueller's report, if any of this stuff goes into that kind of long back and forth you're describing there, do you expect that would push Flynn's ultimate sentencing off even further?
Again, that's up to the judge, and this is a very particular judge who has very particular reputation for demanding more than some other judges would demand from the government. So it's up to the judge to decide if he doesn't like these answers and if that means he's going to hold up the sentencing for it. And remember, one of the big unknowns here, though, and I know we're all focused on the particular Flynn-Kislyak conversations that we know about, one of the other things that we really don't know about is how many other conversations like this were recorded, because that's also in what the judge ordered to be made public. And that may be an even bigger problem in the eyes of the prosecutors. But to be clear, we just don't know how large a group of calls that is.
And even if the judge does come to an accommodation with prosecutors about him getting to see that classified information for the purposes of informing his own sentencing decision, that doesn't necessarily mean that even the judge would be empowered to release that information to the public. Even at that point.
Right.
Yeah, fascinating.
Right. Exactly.
Devlin Barrett, national security reporter for the Washington Post. Thank you for helping us sort this out. You have made more sense about this to me than anybody else who's talked about it all day. Thanks a lot.
It is Monday, the 3rd of June of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. It's really been another one of those weekends, has it not? And we've had to slice and dice and toss it up, and it is quite a reconstructed gourmet dish for you today. Today, Luna D, this is the day that we can howl at the moon after that weekend. What weekend has it been? Well, any number of things. Take your pick. It's like all the other weekends. Take your pick. There's any number of stories that you could pull out of a hat that shows that one, Donnie Two Scoops Trump has, embarrassed the United States once again beyond measure. Well, maybe that's inflating it a little bit too much. Not beyond measure, but because everything can be measured. But he's over in Great Britain right now making a fool of himself. Had to go to the ambassador's residence because somehow, some way, Buckingham Palace has some renovations going on. And, we just don't have any room for you there. So he's gone to the ambassador's residence expecting to be picked up in that royal carriage, I'm sure. We'll see how that works out. On the way over there, he decided to insult the mayor of London. Before you even touch down, do not insult the people that are going to be, testing your food and drink. Maybe you don't want to insult those hosts so much. Maybe it was Trump's decision to go to the ambassador's residence because he probably knew that since he put the ambassador there, that all the germaphobe necessities that he requires would be provided, and he wouldn't have to worry about, the host that he insulted testing his food and drink. Wow. It's almost like he's been around. You only need to learn once or twice. You never let it happen again. Ever. He tried to back out, calling Meghan Markle nasty. Of course, Lordy, there are tapes. Even the GOP, in their denial that he called Meghan Markle nasty, had the transcript of his exchange where he called her nasty. I know. He said, I didn't know she was so nasty. And the GOP and all of the sycophants are saying, see, he never said she was nasty. He didn't ever think that she was that nasty. Yeah, that's a schoolboy trick that probably worked in your rich boy military-themed academy. But in America, the real America, and I don't mean that part of America where people voting against your interests seems not very reasonable to your family. So I'm not talking about the cult 45 MAGA hatters who will follow this fellow right off the cliff. I'm pretty sure he's not going to be able to shoot anybody in the middle of Trafalgar Square and get away with it. I don't think so. He thinks he can, but I don't think so. I think it was Borowitz who said that Trump thinks he can be a better princess than Meghan Markle, and I believe that Borowitz is right. What's on the rest of the menu here? Well, right off the top, the secrecy, the supposed secrecy of these Flynn intercepts complicates the whole to-do, doesn't it? Feature, not a bug. Barr's suspicious decision to, not comply or really just to ignore that federal judge's order. I don't think that you're going to, I think as I speak, some decisions are being made. So I'm in a bubble. But as far as I'm concerned, this particular judge isn't a happy judge when anybody doesn't do what he says. We'll see how it turns out. Talk about upsetting norms, right? On the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe, a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Speaking of Steve Bannon, Italy served an eviction notice on that fascist. He is. He's a white nationalist. Why? Well, he had a little academy for white nationalists, and they don't really want in Italy to be responsible for another, I would say, Anders Breivik. You don't. You just don't. The Supreme Court made it easier for the police to arrest you for filming them. Doesn't stop there either. Go on social media and complain about something? Oops. Wow. Talk about upsetting norms. And Mnuchin only cares about memos that say he doesn't have to release Trump's taxes. Yeah. Upsetting norms. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Pentagon has not bothered to brief the press for 368 days and counting. And the execution of North Korean senior official and former top nuclear envoy Kim Yong Chol was greatly exaggerated. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page, from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon site. And all kidding aside, folks, if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your generosity in that measure helps us resist, as the founders originally intended all those many centuries ago. And it is not only our duty and privilege, but it's our, well, it's our reason to test. And your generosity helps us continue this resistance. We have been doing this for 8 years now, and we've had to purchase some newish machines about halfway through, and lo and behold, we're there again. Your generosity all these years has helped us pay the bills, and what comes out of our pockets and well, honestly yours, keeps this powerhouse of resistance resisting, and we thank you very much for that generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it's simple. Do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then scramble to get those links out on social media. I'm scrambling. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeart, YouTube, and really wherever podcasts can be found. Hey, what's up with iTunes? Now, you can still find podcasts on iTunes. Apparently, they're going to spin off all of these different aspects into apps, apparently. So, but I liked my iTunes playlist. Come on, I want my iTunes back. I want my iTunes. Well, goodbye. Everything changes. Which reminds me, hey, Facebook, Zuckerberg, it'd be nice to have the direct messages that I had before my son died. Can we have them back? Yeah, a little bit of personal business. I'm sorry, folks. I'm not a big fan of Zuckerberg. And, I'm serious. I'd like to have his DMs back. Between he and I. They're my property, too. Oh, I forgot. It's not my property. My private conversations with my son is Zuckerberg's property. We'll talk about that some other day, won't we? We will. I better get in on what we have curated for you today. As I intimated, or actually overtly stated, I have to put myself in a bubble. So that federal judge, Lawrence, is that his name? He'll come to me. But he's not a happy fellow when people don't follow his orders, and I'm curious to hear what he has to say. And he may be saying it as I'm saying the things I am right now. All right, well, let's get into this first offering here out of Think Progress by Sam Fullwood III. Italy doesn't want to be, caught holding the bag for fascism, even though they have a pretty much of a history of inventing the term and have been battling in their own government apparatus the resurgence of fascism. But it's very curious, no one wants to be the last dancer standing in musical chairs. No one does. The Italian government has revoked the lease on a medieval monastery granted to a group led by former White House aide and strategist, and I would also say white nationalist Steve Bannon, citing accusations of fraud connected with its plan to create an international training school for far-right activists. Wow, you mean a place where they can practice to be brown shirts and get away with it? Italy's Cultural Heritage Ministry, which had previously leased an 800-year-old 13th century Carthusian monastery near Rome to the Dignitatis Humana Institute, a conservative Catholic organization, announced that it would no longer honor the contract it agreed to with Bannon, who serves as a trustee to the group. The government said it took seriously reports of fraud in the competitive tender process that led to Bannon securing the property to establish a self-described gladiator school for cultural warriors where students would learn right-wing nationalistic philosophy, theology, history, and economics, and receive political instructions from Bannon. But these plans went awry, potentially permanently, earlier this month after the Italian newspaper Repubblica reported that a letter used to guarantee the lease was forged. In its investigation, the newspaper discovered the letter displayed a signature purported to be of an employee at the Danish bank Jysk. Bank officials told the newspaper that the letter was fraudulent because the employee had not worked there for years. The revelations prompted Italian Culture Minister Alberto Bonassoli to declare the contract with Bannon null and void, arguing the school failed to meet the leasing conditions, do you think? Moreover, Bonassoli said the school had not paid the rent and had not carried out required maintenance work. I'm sure that Bannon says, I wasn't involved in that. In the interview with The Economist, Bannon dismissed the Italian government's claims and said his group would fight to keep the property. Everything actually is totally legitimate. All of this stuff is just dust being kicked up by the left. Oh, Steve. You're going to do a Breitbart on us? The Italian government's move represents one in a series of challenges and controversies swirling about Bannon and his group since December, according to The Economist. The group's chairman, Luca Volonte, a former Christian Democrat politician, has been on trial in Milan, charged with accepting a $2.5 million bribe from private and public sources in Azerbaijan. He was allegedly paid for helping to block criticism of human rights abuses in Azerbaijan while a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And, of course, Volonte denies any wrongdoing, meaning I did it and it wasn't wrong because I'm doing it. Bannon, the former Breitbart news chairman turned senior strategist to Trump, was forced out of his role at the White House in 2017 after a brief but turbulent stint. Since then, he's moved on to create models for far-right political activism in Europe, focusing on populist groups that oppose immigration and advocate for white extremist positions. But Bannon's gloomy shadow never completely faded from Washington, where it still has the ability to embarrass Trump and his staff. Brian Frizzell of Slate brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays, by the way. The First Amendment makes it unconstitutional for government officials to retaliate against you because they dislike your speech. At the same time, federal law gives you the right to sue state officials for compensation if they violate constitutional rights, such as your right to free speech. But the Supreme Court just invented a rule that will often allow police officers to arrest people in retaliation for disfavored speech without liability. By enabling police officers to target viewpoints they dislike with near impunity, the decision could be catastrophic for protesters and the press. Give a rat a cookie, and they're going to want the whole dairy farm. In this reporter's opinion, the justices, meanwhile, didn't even try to ground the decision in the text or history of the statute they were interpreting. Instead, the court was surprisingly frank about its rationale. The justices simply don't want police officers to have to defend themselves against these types of allegations in court. In Neves v. Bartlett, a divided court ruled that individuals cannot sue police officers for retaliatory arrest if those officers had probable cause to arrest them for any crime, no matter how minor, like the broken taillight that just mysteriously got broken when they walked up to the back of your car, like the seatbelt you were wearing that they said you weren't, like the windshield wiper that's streaking streaks across your windshield, not allowing you to see properly. Oh my, I have to search the rest of your car to see what kind of contraband you might have. And then they find some contraband that you didn't know you had, because you never did, but now you do. In other words, if you are jaywalking in violation of a local ordinance, officers can arrest you without fear of liability, even if they are making the arrest only because you are participating in a Black Lives Matter demonstration or wearing a Make America Great Again cap. They're never going to arrest you for that because they got swastikas tattooed right underneath their arm in the most tender part. In this reporter's opinion, because local laws are full of minor infractions like loitering. Yeah, or quivering while loitering in some jurisdictions, I might add. Stop quivering while I'm interrogating you, you perp. That are frequently violated without incident. Police will often have a pretext to arrest people engaged in speech the officers don't like. But immunizing such abuse, Neves may have devastating effects on demonstrators, press photographers, and anyone who wants to exercise their speech rights in public, like the right to film the police or verbally challenge officer misconduct. The power to arrest is a potent tool for suppressing speech, because even if charges are later dropped, arrestees must undergo the ordeal and dangers of being booked and jailed. You know, like suddenly ending up dead in your cell. Oh, they must have hung themselves. Well, how'd they get the implements to hang themselves? You know, these people have their mysterious ways now, don't they? Congress long ago recognized that making officers financially liable is the most effective way to deter such misconduct, and that's why a federal law called Section 1983 enables lawsuits against state officers for violating constitutional rights. This landmark statute was enacted during Reconstruction, when southern states were refusing to respect basic liberties. As one congressman said, the federal government could not directly compel these states to fall in line, but they could deal with the offenders by giving the injured party an original action in our federal courts. Section 1983, therefore, authorizes suits for violations of any rights that are secured by the Constitution. This is since the Reconstruction. Precedent? The 5-member majority on this court doesn't need any stinking precedent. great Oliver Willis of Share Blue Media brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is continuing to defy a request from Congress first issued in April to provide Trump's tax returns. Justin Salk, senior advisor for Treasury's Office of Legislative Affairs, insisted that Mnuchin was justified in his stonewalling because of supposed legal advice from the Department of Justice that does not even exist in writing yet, and no one knows when it ever will. You know, one of the tricks that the Romans used, because there was a lawful decree that had been imposed for centuries, that a law was only law when it was made public. And how it was made public was when it was set in stone, literally set in stone, and displayed in the public square. After a certain amount of time passed and the great wisdom of emperors and the Senate alike, to follow the letter of the law, they would put that new law set in stone, but then they would put it on a pillar so far up in the public square no one could read it. And not everybody had binoculars in those days because they hadn't really been invented yet. The Department of Justice intends to memorialize its advice in a published legal opinion as soon as it's practicable, Salk wrote in a letter to Senator Ron Wyden, ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee. We will provide a copy of the opinion to you when we receive it. You mean when somebody on your staff makes it up? Okay. That's the same promise Mnuchin made earlier this month when he refused to comply with the House Ways and Means Committee's request for Trump's tax returns, which is just settled law. Mnuchin cited advice from the DOJ that he should not comply with the request and said the DOJ should memorialize his advice in a published legal opinion as soon as practicable. Well, that's the same thing that this guy Salk said, or Salk. Wyden, whose committee has congressional oversight over the Treasury Department, sent a letter slamming the continued stonewalling. A slamming letter this time. Not a stern one. This is a slamming one. Well, meanwhile, Mnuchin is ignoring an IRS attorney's memo that does exist and was leaked to the press earlier this month. That memo states that Mnuchin does have to comply with the request and that the only basis for refusing to comply would be the invocation of the doctrine of executive privilege. Well, he doesn't need to read that memo. He doesn't need to take that memo into heed because he has this other memo that says, hey, my name is William Barr. You do what you're told. Mnuchin has been claiming that release of Trump's returns is up to him. But the IRS memo also states that the law does not allow the secretary to exercise discretion when it comes to congressional demands for tax returns. Despite what legal experts say, and despite an IRS memo, Mnuchin is still trying to protect Trump by hiding his returns and the embarrassing, unethical, and, shall we surmise, even criminal business practices they could reveal. Trump has refused to release his tax returns to the public, unlike every other major presidential candidate of the last 40 years. His continued refusal and flimsy excuses only increase speculation that he's covering up incredibly damning information. And his Treasury Secretary is now helping him do it, based on a supposed memo no one has seen. All right, let's get to our break, and when we come back from that break, we will be going through weather from around the world, and my God, there is weather from around the world. And we're going to finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Please
1
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Para Occidere. There are many reasons why the John Wick movies have become the phenomenon that they are. People appreciate how they embrace being focused action films. The art direction and cinematography make them look very cool. Keanu Reeves gives a career-defining performance as the taciturn and tortured John Wick, not the least part of which is his dedicated martial arts and weapons training, which have allowed him to do much of the film's action himself. However, I, of course, think that John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum shows us another reason. John Wick 3 is the action film for our time. It is the action film for people who have spent hours in first-person shooters, shooting, being shot, respawning, and doing it all again. This movie is for them. It opens and John Wick and his compatriots kill and kill and kill and kill and kill. It is empathy-free desensitivity theater because they kill so many people, and we are invited to feel nothing for those deaths other than admiration at the efficiency of their execution. Now, in Chapter 1, we could at least hide behind the thin veil of the revenge tale fueled by a villain who clubs a puppy, but Chapter 3 begins with a $14 million bounty on John Wick's head. That means none of these people who target him and are thus his targets are bad guys. They're just looking for a payday. We don't need them to die beyond our desire for John to survive. Thus, there's really nothing to justify the mountainous body count. We're just not supposed to care. And I like to give the filmmakers the benefit of the doubt and consider that maybe in this film, where people declare that a healthy community needs rules with consequences when the rules are broken, that the filmmakers are reflecting the impersonal cruelty that is so deeply embedded in our society. I'd like to, but nobody in John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, including John Wick, challenges this status quo. It's not a movie about revolution. This isn't The Matrix. I don't know. Maybe that's for Chapter 4. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. 15 million babies are born prematurely every year, worldwide. In some cases, the early births can be life-threatening or cause developmental issues.
They have more attention deficit difficulties. They can have a higher risk of having autism. And in general, sort of socio-emotional regulation issues.
Petra Hupi, a pediatrician and neonatologist at the University Hospital of Geneva. Now, she and her colleagues have evidence that a simple tool could help those preterm babies' brains develop: music. But before you cue the Amadeus...
When I thought about Mozart, I thought this is a very complex musical structure, and I could hardly imagine that such an immature brain would be able to fully capture the complexity of Mozart.
So instead, she recruited the harpist Andreas Vollenweider, who worked with neonatal nurses to determine which sounds would most stimulate infants' brains. He then composed a suite of 3 8-minute-long tracks, which the nurses played to 20 preterm babies using wireless headphones embedded in little baby caps. Each baby heard 5 tracks a week for about 6 weeks on average. Then, Hupi's team used MRIs to visualize activity in the babies' brains. And what they found was that preemies who listened to tunes had brain networks that more closely resembled those of full-term babies, compared to their counterparts who didn't get the treatment. The music listeners had greater connectivity among brain regions, such as areas involved in sensory and higher-order cognitive functioning, indicating that music listening might have enduring effects on brain development. The details are in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Of course, many questions still remain.
How much should they listen to that? Was the music given in the right way? Would it be much better if it was something more lively than a recorded music? Was it too simple, or could it be more complex?
But Hupi said one thing parents can already do is sing to their children. Plus, she said, it doesn't really matter if you can carry a tune. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Again, the National Weather Service saying this is a life-threatening situation and the media should be using the strongest language possible.
Deadly, relentless storms tapering off for now after hammering Midwest. Mississippi River flooding now longest lasting in over 90 years. 2 congressional Republicans block disaster relief bill. Plus,
if we don't take action now, it's going to be extremely out of our control.
Climate strike protests help propel climate candidates into EU Parliament.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I was just checking social media. We have viewers complaining already. Just go back to the show. No, we're not going back to the show, folks. This is a dangerous situation, okay?
Okay, but The Bachelorette is on. Jamie Simpson, meteorologist of Fox 45 in Dayton, Ohio. I know there's a huge tornado outside, but The Bachelorette. This is your Green News Report.
I'm done with you people. I really am. This is pathetic.
Okay, Desi Doyen, I think we sort of have some good news in that these unceasing storms and tornadoes may be pausing for a few days?
Maybe. That's according to the National Weather Service that says the weary Midwest may soon catch that break from the relentless hammering of deadly destructive storms of the last several weeks. The month of May has been one of the most active periods for tornadoes in U.S. history. More than 500 tornadoes were reported over the last 30 days, with a new record of at least 8 tornadoes per day for 12 days straight.
There have been more than 500 reported tornadoes?
Yes.
Wow.
The highest one-day total was 68 tornadoes. So far this year, tornadoes have been blamed for at least 38 deaths in the United States. But the flooding caused by record rainfall this spring is not going away yet in Kansas, Oklahoma, or Arkansas, and it may not fully recede until July. On the Weather Channel, National Weather Service hydrologist Bill Lawrence compared the torrential rainfall in Kansas to Hurricane Harvey.
Their normal average rainfall in the city of Wichita is 32 inches and some change. So that's 76% of an annual rainfall in 1 month. Now, this is not Harvey, but it's as close as we get to Harvey in this part of the country.
Flooding along the Mississippi River this year has lasted so long, it is now the second longest since the Great Flood of 1927.
I'm almost speechless here. I have no idea when people are going to figure out that we are facing a serious crisis.
And people are asking about the influence of climate change. Now, scientists have confirmed that heavy rainfall from storms has increased by as much as 70% in some areas of the United States since the 1950s. And they say it will only get worse in the coming years thanks to man-made global warming. Now, the influence on tornadoes is harder to pin down due to a lack of historical data, but there is a trend toward more frequent tornado swarms with more tornadoes per outbreak. One study found that since 1950, the number of days seeing at least 32 tornadoes has more than doubled.
Yeah, but the good news is the Donald Trump Department of Energy is now referring to liquid natural gas as freedom gas.
So there's that.
Yep.
The months of extreme storms, floods, and tornadoes have cost farm country billions of dollars in losses and delayed planting season for many of America's farmers.
You mean those Trump voters in farmland?
Yes. The U.S. Department of Agriculture announced this week that farmers have planted less than 50% of their intended corn crop for 2019 and less than 20% of their intended soy crops. If they plant too late, they will miss the deadline to qualify for federal crop insurance.
Well, maybe they'll get lucky and they'll find freedom gas under their farms.
However, victims of these storms will have to wait longer for help because 2 congressional Republicans have thwarted a $19 billion bipartisan disaster relief funding bill in the U.S. House that had already passed the Senate and won White House approval. Republicans Chip Roy of Texas and Thomas Massey of Kentucky demanded that the vote be held after members return from their holiday recess next week. That delay means that disaster victims across the nation who have been hit by devastating hurricanes, wildfires, and floods would have to wait at least another month for assistance.
No rush. Puerto Rico has waited 2 years as is, so what's the hurry?
Finally, there is some good news in Europe. On Friday, May 24th, more than 1 million people around the world rallied their governments to act on climate change, part of the latest students' climate strike that occurred right before voting began in elections for the European Parliament. The students' climate strike movement appears to have had an impact on the election, with climate change a major factor in the campaigns. Plus, a surge of young voters and their parents propelled Europe's Green Party to modest but widespread gains in the EU Parliament, where they'll now have greater influence on environmental policy than ever before.
Well, that's good news for Europe. It'll be interesting to see if these relentless storms in the U.S. end up having an effect on our election in 2020.
Indeed.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
I hate to be needy, selfish and greedy, but please pay attention to me.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day that the International Lady Garment Workers Union was formed. 11 delegates attended the founding meeting. They represented the major garment-making cities of the East Coast. Most of the membership of these unions were Jewish immigrant women. Many were socialists, or had been involved with trade unions in their home countries before making their move to the United States. They brought this union culture with them to the garment industry. Herman Grossman was elected the first president of the union. Men held all of the leadership positions of the ILGWU during its early years. This opened the union to criticism that the leadership did not represent the membership. Despite this criticism, the union grew quickly. Only 4 locals joined the ILGWU at its first meeting, but soon locals were chartered beyond the East Coast in cities such as Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, and San Francisco. From its inception, the ILGWU became a leading advocate for what is known as social unionism. This type of unionism looks beyond workplace issues to a broader agenda of social welfare. This included holding labor history classes, English language classes, and performance art. In 1913, the union opened a health center for its members in New York City. The ILGWU became an important progressive force in the labor movement. In 1975, they launched the Look for the Union Label ad campaign, including this commercial from 1981.
For the union label, when you are buying one coat dress or blouse.
As more and more garment work moved out of the United States, membership fell. In 1995, the ILGWU joined with the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union to form Unite. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 59 degrees Fahrenheit, slated for another high of, maybe in the low 90s. They say the upper 80s, but I have the experience that when they say that, it really means the low 90s here at the mothership. And, which reminds me, the term mothership just reminded me. We had a bit of a snafu overnight, and apologize for a bit of silence. Had a little bit of a mistake. A feed didn't come through when it was supposed to. And it wasn't a file, it was a feed. Okay? And it kind of messed things up, and we apologize for that. We'll be on top of that better next time. Sorry. All right. So, yes, in the mothership, we usually are a tad warmer than what is forecast just about a mile and a half away from me. All right, so it looks like we're going to have an overnight low in the upper 50s, and tomorrow we're going to have just about the same type of weather. Currently sunny conditions, light and variable winds out of the west will be shifting slightly out of the northwest and increasing at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And that will be the forecast for the day. We'll have those types of winds, which we had yesterday. We'll have them today and tomorrow. Grass pollen is rated at very high. The air quality index is in the good range at 32 parts per million. Not so good. It's getting close to moderate there. The daytime UV index is very high at 9. Barometric pressure is holding at 29.81 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity currently is at 68%. But it's going to go down into the low 30s as it did yesterday. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 68 and partly cloudy. Paris is 68 and mostly cloudy. I was just thinking about London and Trump being there, and it's cloudy. Okay, good. As long as they can fly the blimp. The baby Trump blimp. That'll be fun. All right. Once again, Paris is also at, they're at 60. They just ticked up to 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. Sorry about that. Rome is 80 degrees and fair, and they have a heat warning. Kiev is 84 and fair. Kabul is 73 with showers in the vicinity. Hong Kong is 79 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 71 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 49 degrees with a rain shower. San Francisco, California is 54 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 68 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Oliver Willis brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Can you believe this? 368 days, counting today, that the Pentagon has not held a press briefing to brief the press about anything that's going on. Well, Friday marked exactly 1 year since the Department of Defense held an official press briefing. The last briefing was given on the 31st of May of 2018. The Pentagon press corps has chafed for months at what reporters see as a sharp decline in access to information, including limited access to officials during trips. In the days since the last briefing, or the year, and counting. The Pentagon briefing room has been used for media events with KISS band member Gene Simmons and actor Gerard Butler, but not for its intended purposes of informing the press and the public about important developments related to national defense. Well, I guess that's a feature, not a bug. Just breaking down norms now, isn't it? Just deconstructing the administrative state.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Joyce Lee of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. North Korea's former top nuclear envoy Kim Yong Chol accompanied leader Kim Jong-un to an art performance, state news agency KCNA said on Monday today, signaling that the former spy master is alive and remains a force in the power structure. His appearance followed conflicting reports of shakeups in the team that led engagements with the U.S. last year, only for nuclear talks to collapse after Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump failed to strike a pact at the February summit. KCNA named Kim Yong Chol as the 10th person among a group of 12 leading officials who accompanied Un and his wife, Ri Sol-ju, to an amateur art performance by the wives of officers in the North Korean army. Wow, they better put on the performance of their lives or they could lose theirs. South Korean newspapers had said that Kim Yong Chol, the leader's right-hand man and counterpart of U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo before the failed summit, had been sent a labor and re-education camp. Asked about the reports of a shakeup of Kim's negotiating team in a May 5th interview with ABC News, Pompeo said it did appear that his future counterpart would be somebody else, adding, but we don't know that for sure. In April, an official photograph from a session of North Korea's rubber stamp legislature showed Kim Yong Chol standing behind Kim Jong-un, but he did not accompany Kim on a summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Well, he appears to have been pushed back from power since the Hanoi summit, a senior fellow at the ASAN Institute for Policy Studies in Seoul said, but exactly how much is something we're not able to figure out. With Reuters unable to confirm independently, North Korea executed its working-level nuclear envoy to the U.S., Kim Hyok Chol. It's very difficult to factually verify North Korean top leadership purges or removals, said Hong Nin, a senior researcher at the Korea Institute for National Unification. So these are developing stories, and we're probably going to hear that a lot more people were executed and some were not. So that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you know that Netroots Radio's got to be broadcasting on, so we'll meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme aux langues de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.